Steve Turner seconds.
Rich Cilio moved it.
Yeah.
Okay, please, if you're going to speak, identify your name so that we know who is voting on all of these, okay? If we get there. I'm going to go to item number 4, which was a communication that was given to Ed Moan, and we'd like to add this to the agenda, which has to do with the possible deferral of taxes or an abatement, temporary abatement of interest on taxes. Ed, if I could, let me ask you if you could explain the 2 options that have been given to us.
Who are you asking, me, George?
Yes.
Okay, all right, Edmond speaking. We've been given 2 options as it relates to tax deferral and or interest on a period of time regarding taxes, regarding taxation. So it's a 3-month period, and it would impact, in terms of the town side, it would impact the taxation that would become effective July 1. We have 2 options that we have as a town. One is to simply defer payments for 3 months, or we can take another option, which would be for that same 3-month period, which would be essentially July 1 to October 1. We could reduce the interest, which is currently at 18% per annum, state statute, to 3% per annum, which would equate to 1/4% per month instead of the 1.5% that it would traditionally be. So those are the options that we have, and essentially the governor has ordered in one of his executive orders, I believe it was 7S, but I wouldn't say that must take one of the 2 options. So I'm looking for the Board of Selectmen, or I am as first selectman. I'm looking for a recommendation from the Board of Finance in consultation with our financial director and our tax collector as to what option we believe is best for the town.
I'll speak for myself, George Seaborn. I favor the lowering of the interest rates rather than deferring the tax for 3 months, and a couple of reasons. One is that that could affect the liquidity of the town if we put off collection of taxes for 3 months, even though some of those taxes that are escrowed would come in automatically anyway. The reduction of the interest seems a better choice because we would not be waiting on some of our tax revenue. We would still get that in on time. The only people that it would affect would be the delinquent taxpayers. We've got those people knocked down over the last several years quite a bit, so we wouldn't lose that much revenue. I don't know if Tracy, if we had talked about this earlier, if you could come up with an estimate or a guess on how that would impact interest collected, if you were able to get any numbers from the tax collector on that.
Using the taxes or the interest that was collected in a 3-month period last year, and assuming that it would be collected at the 3% versus the 18%, the lost interest would be about $35,000.
Has that been built into the budget proposal?
It has not, no.
So that would have to be put into the budget proposal, or a reduction of revenue?
Correct.
Okay. So let's keep that in mind. Now we had talked to Tracy about this deferral of 3 months. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, like I said, my concern was the cash flow, obviously. You know, July is when we start running low on cash, and, you know, we still have, our bills are going to stay the same. We still have payroll to make. I tried to get an answer from Cassie. She wasn't able to get me an answer in time for tonight's meeting on how much is collected from escrows, because they're exempt from this. So if we pay into an escrow, that money still has to be turned over to the town. So I don't know exactly what the impact would be.
Do we know how many people do pay through the escrow?
I don't. That's what I had asked Kathy, but she wasn't able to get back to me.
I did talk to Cass, and she said that the company that provides our computer programming for interest, they are going to have a patch for this already at, I believe, at no expense to the towns.
Correct.
And they're doing this statewide. So that program can be put into effect without any trouble. I don't know how anyone would like to comment on that.
George, as first selectman, I just would like to make one comment in regard to all of that. As we consider these options, understand that we have some road projects that we have already decided we would move forward with. And generally speaking, we would utilize our own funding sources initially to pay these bills as they occur. We actually have a road reconstruction project that should be kicking off within, I'm going to say, roughly the next month. And as they do some of that work, they'll be looking for some partial payments. So that is going to impact our cash flow going forward as well. We need to consider that as we consider what options we take.
Right. Tracy, would you agree with Ed on that?
Yes.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
The interest could end up being a problem for some people to pay because of lack of income and so forth due to this virus. Is there any way that we would be allowed to waive the interest for these people, even though we have to go with the two plans that are put forth by the governor?
We have no ability to waive income.
We have no ability at all?
There's no other options, Adam. It's either or both. But you can't, we have no additional options available under the executive order.
Right, but as a town, can't we forego the interest when they
No,
do pay it?
No, we cannot. All taxes and assessments are driven by state statute.
Okay.
And we have no other options other than those given to us by the governor.
Any payments that are made are applied first to interest and only then to principal. So the interest would be paid first, no matter what.
Right. Okay.
Tracy, I apologize if you've already answered this question, but have we done any sort of cash flow, I don't know, projections as far as where we might end up? Because I think we're kind of walking a tightrope in that we can either side on the town side of a cash flow issue, or on kind of the more politically correct side that the government's been playing lately, which is on the side of the taxpayer, to ensure that, you know, they're not going to be short cash or out any money as a result of this virus. So are we sure, or do we have any sense of where we would be from a cash flow perspective? Should we forego payment, or are we just concerned that we would have a cash need?
Well, in the July, August, September last year, we collected more than 50% of our tax revenue, so over $10 million. So,
right.
You know, I mean, again, the escrows are still going to be paying. I don't have a figure for you as far as how much we'd be deferring.
Okay, and I guess on that note, is this a decision that needs to be made today, or do we have time to get that information? And I'm not one to wait, but you know, there's a lot of different legs, I think, to this decision as it relates to not only financial but also political.
Luke, Edmond speaking again. We have to file with OPM no later than April 24th what option we will be taking. So we do need to move on this.
Okay. So having said that, George, I would opt for the lower interest and collect cash on the early side.
Thanks, Rich.
I would agree with that. Mike Matto.
Adam Silverman, I agree with that also.
This is Rich, I agree.
Okay, so let's go ahead and put this to a vote, actual vote. I'd entertain a motion to approve that we will lower the interest rate during the period of time to 3%. And Ed, what was the executive order on that? Do you remember?
I believe it was 7S. Maybe Tracy can confirm that for me. I see Stacy shaking her head. And it is 3% per annum, which actually equates to 0.25% per month for the 3-month period that we're discussing.
And so, did you say that was 7S?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be pursuant to the executive order 7S. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Luke.
And that was
Mike
seconded
seconds.
by Mike, okay. All those in
And Luke?
favor?
Aye.
Luke made the motion.
Right, we got that. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Before
There's
we get
two
into
people that are
tonight,
muted on this.
what's that?
Stacy and are muted. I don't know if they mean to be.
Oh, I muted myself.
Before we get into tonight's main portion of the agenda, which is the discussion of the education budget, I want to bring up something that we don't have to vote on this, but I think it's for a matter of information. Glenn Clark's here tonight, so Glenn, if you want to comment on this, it would be helpful. But what happened was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, the highway department went to the capital committee to request a body for one of the trucks to be used. The body would be a stainless steel body, which would resist any type of problems as a result of salt. As you remember, we had one body that pretty much melted away because of salt. So Glenn had a couple of quotes. The board capital improvement committee wanted a third quote. He went and got that. He is able to purchase this by reappropriating money within his budget from the savings of snow and ice. So rather than have it go and be a capital item, we can buy it right now with the savings from the snow and ice and not have to borrow for that. It also has the ability, if the truck underneath it wears out at some point, that body can be transferred over to another truck body. Glenn, you want to, I have the numbers, but you want to just go through that with the committee?
Sure. Glenn Clark, Highway Superintendent. The body that we do have on the trucks now it's being patched up, so it's not going to make another season. Our theory is to start buying stainless steel bodies so we can keep moving the body along onto trucks. It'll be a savings down the road. You see that there's 3 quotes in there. The last quote that I got, it is a little bit less, but it doesn't have the options that we need on it. We're looking, the truck that we have has a barn door on it, which in turn so that when we go out, we have to pick up large trees and stuff like that. you can just swing the door off to the side, it stays attached to the truck. Otherwise, we got to keep taking it off and on. This way it never comes off. The truck has a barn door on it now. So the other thing about it is that the other quotes are sandblasting the frame and painting the frame. Everything is stainless that's going back on, and all the hydraulic lines are going to be stainless. So that's why it's just a little bit more, but it's something that we'll be able to have for a while.
Quote that you're looking to have to go through is Truck Builders of Connecticut.
Yes, they're out of Truck Builders are out of Plymouth, Connecticut.
Okay, and the number.
If I may, if you have your speaker unmuted and there's conversations going on in the background, if you could please mute so we don't hear them.
Did everybody hear what Stacy had to say? If you have people in the background or talking, it's broadcast right through this. So if you could mute yourselves, and then we'll move on. So the number from Truck Builders of Connecticut is $53,840. And my understanding, Glenn, is that you have that money in your budget already?
Correct. There's 50, Tracy can correct me. It's like 56,000 left in that account.
Yeah, 55,686.
Yeah. So, what Glenn, as we all know, the money that's in your budget, you can repurpose if you have to. He's coming here tonight as a courtesy to us to let us know that that's what he wants to do. If not, we're going to have to go out and borrow the money to accomplish this. So the Winter Connect was working with us, and we're able to take it out without having to bond it. Does anybody have any feelings about whether they would rather bond it?
Steve Turner, I just think it's a no-brainer. I'm on the Capital Improvements Committee. Glenn could not make that meeting, but Glenn reached out to me about this issue. Again, I just think it's a no-brainer. We're just reallocating money within his budget. We get the benefit of having a good year on snow and ice to actually get an item that Glenn really needs. So I think it's a win-win.
I agree with Steve.
As well. I do as well, Mike.
Okay, please use your names so Stacy has them. This does not involve a vote. It's just a matter of a courtesy that Glenn is coming to us to mention that he wants to repurpose the snow and ice to go to a stainless steel truck body, which, by the way, is related somehow to snow and ice. So
I'd also like to add that I've seen some of the company's work that the company that Glenn is looking at. They actually do fantastic work. So I think Glenn's making a good choice with who he's using.
okay, thank you, Mike.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea to use the dollars we have. This is Rich.
Thanks, Rich. But I would like to, unless somebody wants to speak up against, I would like to tell Glenn tonight that the consensus of the Board of Finances that he could go ahead and repurpose that money to buy the truck body. Any negatives? Okay, Glenn, then you've heard from us, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Francine there?
Francine's muted.
Francine and Todd probably.
I think I'm good now. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Todd needs to be unmuted as well.
I'm doing that.
Hear me?
Yes, Todd.
Okay,
So I'd like to, because of everything that's happened in the last 24 hours concerning the education budget, um, I'd like you to go through the summary, and then you and Francine can address what you consider the savings to be, where they're coming from, and what you'd like to do. So who would like to start as far as the summary goes on the budget?
Stacy, would you be able to bring up the PowerPoint?
Come on. How are you, Rich?
are you laughing at me, George?
Yes.
I saw that.
I want to know if Luke's dog voted or if it was Luke that voted.
So I could just start.
Go ahead.
Okay. So as always, we start with the mission statement. In partnership of family, school, and community. Our mission is to educate, challenge, and inspire each individual to excel and become a contributing member of society. There it is. Next slide, the operating budget request. 2019-2020 budget, 16,366,843. 2020-2021 budget, 16,735,436, for an increase of $368,593, or 2.25%. The town allocation budget. Next slide. 2019-20 budget, 15,257,126. 2020-2021, 15,652,303, for an increase of 395,177, or 2.59%. Okay, so budget perspective, our 2000, actually that, we were good, the other slide, there we go. was 0.287%, or 42,573. 2018-2019 increase was 1.2%, or 198,843. The current budget, 19-20 budget, we had a 1.24% increase, or 187,592. The 2020-21 initial increase was 8.23%, but we did do a lot of things to be able to get that down. Next slide, or
I'd like to just say that 8% is where we start every year. We start with a number of everything that we want and need, and then we whittle it down to what's a reasonable amount, and we whittled it down to the 2.59 funding for this year. So understand, we start with what we need for the new year. We don't simply add a percentage of growth on every line. We actually start with a zero budget, which I want to make sure I emphasize, seeing that 8%, knowing that we got down to the 2.5.
so to lower the budget, we do regionalization efforts to reduce costs. We have our regionalized transportation with Plymouth and Woolkit. We regionalize our oil bidding. We have a shared food service director with Woolkit, shared business manager with Woolkit. I heard he's very good. Full medical benefits with Winchester, Region 7, and Gilbert School. Administration's collaborative and diligent efforts to reduce the budget with the least effect on student learning. That was our goal. Our 2018-2019 per pupil expenditure is $15,972, which ranks Thomaston 137 out of 166 district regions in Connecticut. Only 29 districts in Connecticut have a lower per pupil expenditure than Thomaston. Budget trends over the last 8 years. I won't read them all to you, but we've averaged over the last 8 years, including this proposal, we're averaging 1.09%. The CPI, the Consumer Price Index, has averaged 1.6 over the last 8 years, the same time period. So what does this budget mean to the taxpayer? The Board of Ed is very cognizant of how the budget impacts the taxpayer. In 2019, 2020, one mil was valued at $552,548. The current increase of $395 of 177 represents 0.715 mils. So for an example, with a house of a 200,000 fair market value, assessed value at 140, that 0.715 mils equals roughly $100 of a tax increase, or $8.33 per month. Our budget overview, budget changes in our object line items. Salaries, object 111 is increased by 280,835. Contractual raises for certified staff, reinstatement of the social worker at center school, and a new registered behavior technician position for the new TLC program at Black Rock has contributed to that increase. Salaries 112 is actually down 74,890. Reduction in the one-to-one paraprofessional position as a result of the creation of the TLC program at Black Rock School. We were able to eliminate 3 paras because of that program. Our benefits, object 200, is increased 98,667. We had an initial increase of health benefits of 9.9% from Connecticut, but we did have a balance with a reduction in staff currently, so budget is now in health benefits only increased 4.42%. Also, the severance line item increased due to teacher retirement incentive programs that we instituted. Other professional tech services, object 300 is up 95,717. And contractual costs to effective school solutions for the additional staff for the new TLC program at Black Rock School, and the cost of the new accounting payroll software that we had to initiate because our current software was not going to be helped.
It wasn't.
Transportation 510, decrease of 54,459. So that's actually a decrease in special ed transportation costs through our regional collaboration with Plymouth and Woolkit. Also a reduction in outplaced students and utilization of less costly facilities related to transportation costs. Special ed tuition, objects 560 and 563, decrease of 66,696, and that's just attributable reduction in outplaced students. Other professional services, increase of 94,812. The replacement of the no longer supported telephone system and the reduction in the pay-to-play account balance, which did not allow the same level of offset to the team transportation account as did in the 2019-2020 budget. So accountability and transparency. We monthly deliver the business manager report to the finance director.
Not true.
Which includes up-to-date business finance information, business notices and actions, finance data, expenditures and revenue, budget projections, budget transfers review.
I'd like to just say something right now, Todd. If anybody speaks out again in comments like that without being recognized, they will be muted and they will not be allowed to have anything to say at this point. Please do not interrupt anybody while they're speaking. If you want to say something, there'll be time at the end of this meeting where you can comment. Thank you.
Thank you, George. For Board of Ed, state grants, these are actually state grants and also federal grants that we get that run through the state. Our state IDEA grant, $231,342. Our Title I grant, $95,635. Our Title II grant, $18,932. The preschool grant, $18,832. Our state excess costs, $284,564 we're projecting. Adult ed grant, $11,561. Our state magnet transportation grant, $113,993. Preschool grant, $73,500. School readiness grant, $26,343. Now we have other revenues that we use to offset the budget. Our pay to participate in athletics, $36,545. Pay to participate, the Chromebook contribution from parents, $20,000. Tuition from the PATS program, $110,886. Preschool tuition, $35,000, and gate receipts of $6,000. The total state grants and other revenues is $1,083,133. Okay, our pie chart, the operating budget breakdown. This shows how the objects are broken down. You can see that salaries is 54.77%, benefits is 16.2%. So if you look at it, the fixed costs, if you take all those, our transportation costs, our building maintenance costs, fixed costs are approximately 93% of the budget. So there's not, doesn't leave a lot extra to deal with. The next slide are operating budget category differences from prior year. Again, you can see the salary, contracted services and benefits are the big increases, but we do have decreases in special ed tuition and our special ed transportation. Uncontrollable factors that could impact the budget, as always, unanticipated special ed outplacements is always a factor. Our revenue to Thomaston for our ECS money and special ed costs. It could be a change in excess cost reimbursement. We budgeted 70%. At the prior state reimbursement method, there's talk that they're going to change how they reimburse us for that, but we budgeted 70%. Unplanned building maintenance, repairs issues, and utilities and snow removal costs. Next slide, our excess cost rate analysis. We budgeted 70% or $284,564. If we budgeted 75%, that would give us revenue of $304,890, a difference of $20,326, or a 0.13% difference to the budget. Over the past 5 or 6 years, it's averaged between probably 70 and 74%. Next slide are the past program analysis that we do every year. This is a cost benefit analysis, but not only does this beneficial to the students in Thomaston to stay in district, it also makes sense fiscally. So if we did not have the program, we'd have extra cost, tuition costs of $234,939. We'd have additional transportation costs of $88,580. We'd have to hire additional social worker of $89,693. The benefits for that would be $19,000. We do pay Effective School Solutions $283,300. So that's a cost offset. But we do for budgeting gross revenue from other districts of $110,886. So the net savings of the program is $259,798. Next slide are personnel staffing changes from the prior year. We were.
I'm sorry, can we go back to that slide?
Sure.
Who was that?
I believe that was luck.
That was luck, yeah. So projected without program versus actual. I'm struggling how that math adds up here.
So if we didn't have the program, we'd have these additional costs. So it's a savings.
Right,
to the
we'd
budget.
have 2, 3, 410,000 versus 300,000. It's I don't think the number adds up to 259,000.
Yeah, the revenue is an offset, so that's a savings as well.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now I see it. Okay.
Okay,
Because that's the tuition we're actually getting for the program.
Correct, yep.
All right, fair. Thank you.
Okay,
Great.
you're welcome. So our personnel staffing, we were able to reduce 3 paraprofessionals for savings of $134,878. We do have a additional literacy interventionist at Black Rock, at a cost of $75,554. We do have an additional TLC program registered behavior technician of $64,000. An additional social worker of $84,374 at center school. But we were also able to eliminate a paraprofessional at the high school for $39,948. Net cost $49,102. Next slide are new and continued programs. The past program has been a success. The new TLC program.
I'm sorry
Black Rock School-
to jump in again. Were those fully loaded costs, benefits and everything?
Yes, benefits are included in that. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Francine,
Yes,
this is George, could you explain the TLC program?
the TLC program is a program for students in grades kindergarten through grade 3. It's located at Black Rock School, and it's supported in the same way that the PATHS program is supported. So we pay Effective School Solutions to provide us with a clinician. We use our own teacher. And what we have in that position, in that program, is the registered behavior technician, which is why we no longer need the 3 paraprofessional positions, because the students that have been placed in that program had one-to-one paraprofessionals, and the registered behavior technician and the smaller class size reduce the need for paraprofessionals. So the TLC program is not taking tuition yet like the PATHS program, and it has significantly fewer seats available than what the PATHS program has, but it is a way of keeping our little ones with us on campus and in town instead of outplacing them because of their behavior.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Todd.
Okay, so back to our courses. We have the STEM labs, robotics. We offer dual college credit courses for UConn, early college experience, ECA program, advanced placement courses. We still have the certified nurses assistant program, CNA. Next slide, we have the paralegal certification program for grades 10 through 12 with 30+ college credits through post-university and state certification in paralegal. Students will be fully employable in entry-level paralegal and guaranteed acceptance into the paralegal associate's degree program at post-university. We offer online courses for the world language program and Odysseyware for credit recovery and maintenance. Next slide, we have our full-day preschool that was new in 2017-18. We have social and emotional programs per student need. We have the K through 6 academies, which are enrichment programs, teacher design program for all students. Example is the Stock Market Academy, which was a 2018 state winner. We have transportation for the after-school programs, grades 4 through 6, after-school enrichment, grades 7 through 12, after-school homework, schoolwork, with assistance from a certified teacher.
Todd, can you just let me make a statement about that last bullet? So the certified teacher at the high school who helps with the after-school homework, schoolwork assistance program does not cost any additional funds. They come in and they work their 7 1/4 day shift. They just come in a couple of days a week, a little later than typical, so that they can stay later. So it's wonderful in that way that we have that flexibility.
Good. I'm going to just step in. Whoever has the children in the background, could you please click mute on your screen so we won't hear them? It's making it difficult to understand what people are saying. I'm sorry, Francine, go ahead.
No, my point was just that the after-school program at the high school utilizes a certified teacher at no additional cost because we were able to flex their shift so that a couple of days a week, that teacher comes in later than all the other teachers and therefore stays later so that that program can be managed.
Yeah, could you turn your phones off if you haven't turned them off, please?
Okay, the final slide is our budget summary. With a zero-based budget preparation, it went from teachers to administrators, to superintendent, to the Board of Ed. The operating budget increase is 2.25 overall, but a 2.59 town allocation budget increase. The 2020-21 proposed budget maintains quality core instruction, continuation of successful programs, and new program and approaches that are fiscally responsible and student focused. So that's it. Let's have any questions.
Yeah, I'd like to move on from this because this budget summary, I believe is going to be changed. Over the last few days, the Board of Education, along with Todd and Francine, have been looking at the savings that have unfortunately been created by the pandemic virus that's going around this country. And so I'm going to ask Francine if she can go over some of the things that they've looked at to see what their savings are going to be in this year because of the things that have been, I guess, out of control, out of their control anyway. And so Francine, if you could give us an idea of some of the things you found in your budget that will be actually surpluses. We think they'll be surpluses at this point.
Yes, and Todd, please interrupt me as you see fit. The current status of the schools being closed and one of the executive orders from the governor has made a mandate that bus companies and school districts should get together and negotiate an amendment to their current contract to allow for the minimizing of payments owed. So we pay for approximately 181 days of bus transportation. However, we're not using 181 days. So we expect, based on the governor's executive order's guidance, that after we negotiate with our transportation company, we should realize a significant enough savings whereby we should be able to reduce our, combined with other things, that we should be able to reduce our request above zero to zero. So next year's budget, we're asking for almost a $400,000 increase. And we expect between the typical changes that happen between January and now, as well as the COVID related changes, that between pre-purchasing of hard goods and potentially being able to set aside whatever unspent money there is in the 2% account for things that would have to be purchased after June 30th in the new fiscal year, that we would be able to cover any budget increase that we have requested. But I would need the Board of Finance to make an exception to the rule for any of those things that I can't pre-purchase before July 1, so that we can put money aside and then spend it on July 1 to cover that difference.
So, as you all know, we had set up an account for any surplus that the Board of Ed might have in their school year, and that money was then going to be put into a restricted account, be used, I think up to what, 2% was it, Francine?
Yes, up to 2% of the total amount of our Board of Ed budget.
Right. And the whole purpose of that was to encourage the Board of Education not to spend to get rid of the budget, what was allotted to them. Instead, be willing to save that money and use it for other expenses, maybe even capital expenses. We're in a really strange situation here. And this is basically, hopefully, a one-time occurrence where there's going to be money left over that we could use that money to pay down on the budget for next year. For instance, one of the things that we can buy and are going to buy are, we were going to buy Chromebooks are scheduled to be bought next year.
Yes.
However, we can use the savings from transportation, the transportation with our bus company. We can use that savings to purchase the Chromebooks this year. And it's especially important because now all the kids are home using Chromebooks too.
Yes.
So it would be, it's those type of things we can go ahead and use the savings in this budget to go ahead and reduce next year's budget expenditures. When the Board of Education and Francine and Todd went over this, it appeared that they could go ahead and they're going to have sufficient surplus to go ahead and use that money now to pay down for next year's expenses. And that would render next year's expenses, the budgeted expenses, down to a zero increase in their budget, and which would dramatically change things. Couple of points is that there are a couple of things that because of auditors, we can't go and spend money on certain things for next year until the budget actually starts in July 1st. And then we could immediately go ahead and pay for that.
So I can give you an example of that. So if we're going to purchase hard goods, let's say we're going to purchase the cleaning supplies that we would have used in the summertime. We usually buy those July 1st. We would buy them before then, and we would be able to hold all of our cleaning supplies for next year in the next month or two until we run out at the end of next school year. What we can't buy in advance would be anything that would be either invoiced after the 30th of June, or that would be something that we would attempt to pay before the 30th of June, but services wouldn't be rendered until after the 30th of June. So it would be problematic for our auditors to see us purchasing a recurring license for student use when students aren't going to be using that license until, say, September, and we've purchased it in June if it's to be renewed on July 1. So those are the kinds of things that would be large sums of money that we could spend and use to spend down the increase that we can't do for things like salary. But it would depend on what is most appropriate to spend on June 30 versus July 1.
Any thoughts about how this could be accomplished? Because normally everything that's left in the budget on June 30th would then go into that fund if it was under 2% of your budget. So could we go and put that into basically fund a designated account to be used for next year's budget with this money?
Are you asking me, George?
Sure.
I have the memorandum of agreement that was signed by the Board of Finance, and it points to that the Board of Education agrees that the funds deposited in the non-lapsing account will be used specifically for educational purposes. So if we put them into the 2% account, we would be able to use them for educational purposes. However, as part of our discussion that was not codified in the MOA, we talked about it not offsetting our operating budget. So I wanted to be very open about my intentions for this money. It's not to make a purchase that's an emergency. It's this very odd situation where we actually have hundreds of thousands of dollars available. So I didn't want to not be open about what might be left over if we can't pre-buy services and we don't have enough hard goods to bring down what we would have in surplus.
This is Adam speaking, could the town buy those things prior to July 1 and then the Board of Ed reimburses the town on July 1?
We can buy all of the hard goods before July 1. It's the services that we may not be able to buy. We would just need an invoice saying June 30 as opposed to July 1. So we're going to work on making sure that we don't have really any money to roll into that account if we can help it. But just in case the larger expenses, outside of salary and benefits, the larger expenses would be services.
So this is Rick. So if the surplus is in this fiscal year and we're buying, we're using that surplus to buy things like Chromebooks and things in this fiscal year, doesn't that hold to the letter of that agreement?
This agreement doesn't apply until we have a balance in the 2% account. So we have a zero balance because we haven't ended a fiscal year yet with that account in existence. So we're still purchasing things that can be used in this fiscal year.
I think I think we have to separate the 2% account from the current year overage to try and reduce next year's balance, right?
Yes.
So just forget about the 2% account, understanding that it's something that we've talked about and it's something that we've agreed upon. But I think what we're saying is right now, because of what we have going on in this country and in this town, we're going to be in a surplus in the current year. And what we're saying is we can utilize that surplus next year. And I think right now it's just a big timing game, right? Are there things we can buy now that we can use next year to reduce next year's budget? And I think what you're saying is it's a timing game, right? There's certain things that we can buy now that we will get now that we can put in this year's budget.
Yes.
And there's things that we can contract now, but we won't receive the services until next year, which means it's not actually until next year's budget. And so the play is, can we put it in that 2% account or not? And I think that I think we almost have to ignore that and say, and I think that Francine, maybe this is what you're saying. Are there enough hard goods for you to buy this year to utilize your surplus that will offset whatever increase you have in the budget next year?
The answer would be no. We would need some of those services to be
Right.
purchased.
So either we need some of those services to be repurchased, or do we just say we have a surplus this year and we take it into surplus and we budget that surplus to be utilized next year, understanding that you have this 2% account, but I think the risk we run there is that your 2% account doesn't necessarily capture everything that we're talking about and utilizing it for things that we're talking about, because it has to be used for educational purposes, not necessarily hard goods or laptops or whatever it might be. Is that right? We're kind of playing a timing game here with how the funds get spent.
The timing game would be only on those things that we couldn't get invoiced before, June 30th. And those could be things like, for example, if we have an expiring, like Power School is our student information system. It's an expensive system. It's a per student expenditure. So if it renews on July 1, we would have to either ask them to invoice us, which I don't see why they would say no, because we would be able to cut the check on June 30, but they may say no because of their practices, and we would have to wait until July 1. So that would be something that we would put on the short list of wait until we find someone else to replace that money, because what we're looking at is to spend the money on something that's already in the budget for next year. What that something is could be one giant $300,000 something for next year, or it could be a lot of little things that add up to $300,000. So hard goods, that's easy. We can take care of that right now. Looking at everything that's already been budgeted for next year, we'd be able to eliminate those things from next year's budget and pre-buy and store.
Francine, do you have an idea as to what that number is? This is Mike.
It would be the total amount of what our increase is. So right now we're looking at over 390,000.
And just in hard goods.
No, not in hard goods. I don't have that number yet because we
Okay.
haven't analyzed next year's budget yet because this surplus is rather new to us because of the transportation negotiations that we're going through right now.
What are we looking at from from your 2% account perspective, as far as what your surplus is versus the value of that?
That I don't know until I know how much the hard goods would cost us. Once I know that, then I'd be able to tell you how much of, right now we're looking at about 230,000 that's not accounted for in that 390. So that 230 would go toward hard goods first, and then any service that has a continuation in, that might end this year at an odd time and go into the next fiscal year. And then we would have whatever would be left over to be spent on things that might renew July 1. So I won't know that for
Okay.
probably a week, maybe 2, depending on how our vendors respond to us.
All right, I'm sorry, just to dial back from a surplus perspective, you're looking at about 200,000.
We have over 390,000 in
Over
funds
390,000.
that will negate or eliminate the increase to our budget in the 2021 year. 168.8 are already accounted for, and then 230 are not
I'm
yet.
sorry, how are the 168 already accounted for? Because you've already designated those for hard goods?
We have some savings in other areas. So it's not all cash that we're saving. It's savings that we typically yield this time of the year. So for example, we budgeted in January for a 9.9% increase in healthcare benefits, but now we have our hard number, which is 6%. So the increase is lower. So we've saved 51,000 there. We've already purchased Chromebooks because we were finding the market nearly impossible to get replacement parts. So it was better for us to purchase the Chromebooks. We've already taken care of the Chromebooks. That was nearly 50,000, yes, nearly 50,000. And then we have a retirement that we didn't know about in January that we know about now. So we know the savings on that retirement's about 30. We have a reduction in the athletic transportation in 1920, along with the other transportation reductions. We had a prepayment of our debt service from 1819 of about 46,000. So all of those added together bring us to 168.8 to the good for 2021.
I'm sorry, somebody needs
Please.
to mute because they have some background noise. All right, so
So those
Francine,
things
I guess,
just described were 168.8, and then we still have an additional projected 230 because of transportation and other savings due to the closure of schools.
so basically you have almost, we'll call it $400,000 of surplus in your budget.
Yes, projected.
And based on where your budget is in the 2% savings account, 300 of that will be designated to that account. So
It could be, yes. It doesn't have to
Well,
be that
I
way
think-
to spent.
well, I think based on the agreement that we had, it was 2% would go to it.
Up
The
to,
agreement is that we have a cap of 2%. We can put in $1, we can put in 0, we can put in up to 2%.
Okay.
So we
And-
can pre-buy the hard goods without having it pass through that 2% account.
Okay, so I guess therein lies the question is, how does that mechanism work, George? Because if up to 2% could go in, and we can designate what that number is, and we know that their budget is over by 300 and they have 400, could we say that you designate 100 to that account and take the other 300 to next year as surplus, whether we call it surplus for the current year that rolls into our surplus account, and then we use it as surplus to backfill the overall budget, or, however, whatever you want to call it. Or are we saying that 2% needs to go in, which is 300,000, which means we need to figure something else out?
The way I look at this, Luke, is that there's nothing mandatory about them having to put money into that account.
Mhm.
It's to encourage them to do it so that they don't lose that money if they had a surplus that wasn't spent. But they could
Agreed.
go spend everything they have right now. If they had 400,000, they could spend it. So what I'm thinking is, to the benefit of the taxpayers of the town, they should spend it on the things that would reduce the operating budget for next year. And one of the things that I would like the Board of Ed to do is to, before our public hearing, is to identify the sources of savings. And I know that some of them are estimated. So I would just like to see the sources of savings that are actual, and then estimates on other sources, and have them tied to your operating budget sorted by object, so we know in a line. We can identify a line that's going to have a surplus. And then I'd like a list of those things that we're talking about in your budget that's been proposed for this year, what you're going to take out of that budget as a result of the expenditures from this year's budget. So we can actually trace that money that's flowing from this year's budget surplus and what they're going to move out of the budget that they've given us to look at. So I want to see where that money is coming from and what items are going to be taken out of the budget that we haven't before us. And if we could get that within a couple of weeks, knowing full well that there are some estimates in here, then the only question is, if some of the things cannot be done, they're going to put that money into the 2% account, whether it's 50,000, could even be more, could be 100,000 after they buy. Well, the budget right now is what, about 350,000 increase? And they're talking about 400. So theoretically, if that 400 comes through, they could buy 300 off of next year's and still have 50,000 to put into that 2% account.
Right. And I'm sorry to interrupt, George, but I think what I heard Francine say was she might not be able to spend that 300.
Correct. And what she's asking us to do is to say, okay, if she submits a budget anticipating that she's going to be removing items from the budget that she knows full well that she has to pay for, the money that's used, that's put into that 2% account, can go to pay for the things that she took out of her budget this year.
And part of our MOA includes that we have to give a monthly report on how we've spent that money in the 2% account. So that first month would show exactly a match to what we would give you for the public hearing in about 2 weeks when you're looking for this information. It would match so that you would see what we could spend in the 19-20 year and what we had to wait until July 1st to spend. I would like to add one thing, George, to what you were asking for, because there's two types of figures that are related to us offsetting next year's increase. One is actual surplus. The other is realized savings because either of a change in employee, because of a retirement, or a change in the cost for benefits, those kinds of things. So I'd like to have that also included.
Right. It would be like, I'm looking at a summary form where you'd go ahead and summarize your savings, like for the insurance.
Yep.
And how much money we're looking at. So we can go down and see what things you're cutting out, where the savings are coming from. And then I'd like to see what items are going to be deleted. So we could, you could reference the account number for each item that you're going to pay for or would like to pay for on July 1st.
Yes.
So
Will do.
And hopefully there'll be more than what we're talking about. I mean, if there's 400,000, then there's going to be some money left in that 2% account.
I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
But we haven't completed our negotiation on transportation yet. So once we have that done, and that's been a real slow moving number, we may not know that until much closer to the public hearing as to what we're realizing for the final balance, but hopefully we'll get a little closer than where we are today.
We understand that it's not all going to take place within a couple of weeks. How does everybody feel about this? I mean, I personally like to see them come in with a zero increase.
I think I'd like to see them come in with a zero increase, but I don't want to be unrealistic about it, and I don't want to pre-buy a bunch of stuff we don't need to pre-buy. So if I saw them come in with a 2% increase, understanding that they would have a surplus, and we would backfill that increase with some utilization of our reserve funds, knowing that they would be replenishing that. I don't know. I think I'd like to understand the surplus, what they're spending it on, and what the implications are with the 2% account versus just going out and buying a bunch of hard goods just to buy hard goods.
Luke, is that Luke? I can't see who's talking. Is that you, Luke?
That's me.
So we would be pointing exactly to the line items that we've budgeted for in the new budget. So if we're buying hard goods, it's because it was in the budget for next year. I'm going to make up something. Let's say we were going to buy, a super duper contraption. The super duper contraption is in line, 700. We would point to super duper contraption. We would say that it was $10,000. We bought it already. Take it out of the budget. That's what we would do.
Steve Turner here. If that's the way it's going to play out, like Francine's talking, I would absolutely think it's a no-brainer, especially if this would help us get a budget, either a no-mill increase or possibly a cut. Again, based upon everything that's going on, if we could present that to the taxpayers, I think that would be a great thing. I mean, I think we're being handed. I mean, essentially, it's on a larger scale. We're just, we're doing something with the stainless steel dump body, right? I mean, we're carrying it forward to next year, but, I definitely want to see where, line item for line item where we're saving. But I think if that can play out, then at least from my vantage point, it's a no-brainer.
Well, Steve, I think it's 0% either way. I'm trying to keep in line. If we take this shortfall in spending on transportation, and then we start allocating it, then do we have an unrealistic budget next year, as opposed to actually allocating it to this overage or to our surplus account? I don't want to lose sight of the expenditures by continuously moving them year to year, and also I don't want to go by. I guess I'd like to see more numbers. I'd like to see more information as far as it relates to what we're spending the money on and what we would be spending the money on. But I don't want to lose sight of what the real budget is. And I also don't want to start moving funds around in a way that aren't realistic to what the budget is.
So Luke,
I guess I'm just trying to understand where everything sits right now.
Yep. So I see your point, Luke, but if and I think Francine's agreed to take that away as an action item to come back and say, here's what we're proposing to buy. If a lot of those things were scheduled as one-time purchases for next fiscal year anyway for the Board of Ed,
if they're hard goods, I don't think they are, right? If it's paper, if it's
I mean things like Chromebooks that come up every several years, right? Every couple of years. I don't know what the frequency is.
3 grade levels.
Well, I think Chromebooks we've budgeted to purchase every year.
Every year we buy.
We have a rolling.
10th grade.
So Luke, your concern, this is Mike, your concern is keeping an even flow so that we have a steady historic audit trail so we can look back. Am I understanding that?
Well, it's a little bit of that, and it's a little bit of also I think I'm trying to protect Francine a little bit on the backside, which is we've agreed to to the extent that she's come in with a responsible budget and she's come in under budget, that some funds will go into this account for her to be able to use too. And I want to have clear visibility into what that number is, because if we have the ability to say, maybe it's $1 or maybe it's $300,000, well, I want to make sure she gets a fair shake at that as well. I just don't think that, I think that just saying we're going to take all these funds and spend them all early, I think we're starting to lose sight of what her budget was and what maybe, I guess, what diligence she did on her budget to be able to reduce costs and therefore fund her 2% account for future expenditures, but also make sure that we don't lose sight, us as a board, lose sight of what the actual budget is. To your point, Michael, yes, I don't want to lose sight of what that budget actually looks like. So next year when we roll around, we have a legitimate look at what it should be and what the increase looks like.
This is Adam. Could any of the funds be used for any capital improvements that the Board of Ed was going to be doing in the next fiscal year? Because if it's a capital improvement, then it's a one-shot deal. It uses the money. We know exactly where it went, and it just comes off.
Yeah, but I think capital is it's all about being invoiced before 2 months from now.
The capital budget is a separate budget.
Yeah.
And so it's appropriated to a different budget. So we can't use her funds to pay a different budget. We want to use her funds to pay the Board of Ed budget.
What we're trying to do, I'm trying to make it so we don't have a tax increase based on the Board of Ed's operating budget, because we can assure that with this unusual circumstance that's led to this projected surplus. I just don't want to put it into an account and have it sit there and guess with it. I want to bring our budget down to zero to the town taxpayer. But to do that, I would need to spend as much as I can of that surplus as soon as I can, and then make a determination of what's left in the balance, so that the Board of Finance can make a determination if I actually have a zero increase or if I have a 1% or a 0.5% because I had to hold money over.
Well, I agree with what Steve said earlier regarding if we can see the line items that it's going to go to, then we know exactly where it's going, and it's a win-win.
Now, isn't this really this is a one-off, right? And I say a one-off, Luke, meaning like this is like a perfect storm wherein, some years like, they come in and like Francine will come in and say like, hey, guess what? I had, I had my special ed budget went here because 3 people moved into town. But now this is a situation where it's the reverse, wherein again, a perfect storm has created just, an unbelievable amount of revenue. And I hear what you're saying, Luke. You want some transparency or being able to track this, but won't we always be able to look back to this and say this was the season that we all went into hibernation, and that's why we had this one-off. And so,
except I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead and finish it. I was just going to say, except for next year when paper goods are 500,000, but they should be 750,000. So next year she has a $200,000 increase in paper goods, right? I'm almost of the sense of if she's over by 400,000, let her be over by 400,000, and let her put her budget in, and we will let that flow in to our surplus, and we will just backfill it with.
It's not that. Excuse me, Luke. I'm going to think out loud for a second, but
yep.
If we don't reduce the budget and we go with what they've given us, which is a good budget, if we go ahead with that, any surplus is going to go, first of all, we're not going to know what the final surplus is going to be until maybe September or October. And then that money, and let's say it is $400,000, if that's under the 2% or whatever it is, it's going to go in that fund. We've already approved that.
Which is the question I asked earlier, George, which is, I said, does that have to go into that fund, or do we have the ability to determine what goes into that fund?
We
And-
voted that anything that they have in surplus, up to 2% of their budget,
Right.
would go into that fund. And so if it's more than 2%, then we've got a problem. If we tried to lesser the impact, which I fully intend to do, lesser the impact to the taxpayers for this year, especially, we would be using surplus to do it. And then that surplus, once we use the surplus, all of her benefits, all of her surplus goes into that 2% account.
So,
And
so
has to
Peace,
be used
George,
for
so the information that I got a little earlier was different than what you just said. And what I would say at that point is then I would agree 100% with spend it on the hard goods, see what she can do to reduce next year's budget. My understanding, based on what I heard earlier from Francine, was that we had the ability to determine how much went into that, whether it was $1 or $200,000. In which case, I'd say give her a portion of it, and everything else we would move towards reducing the budget to zero. But if what you're saying is up to 2% goes in, no matter what, then let her spend what she can spend to reduce next year's budget, and at some point something will go into that surplus account.
if
And
they
it sounds
deliver.
like she'll get $100,000 to $200,000 in that account. And if we can find more to spend, then that's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm on board. George, I am now on board with you.
okay. And we fully, we're going to have I'm going to keep this year's budget. So we'll know what was proposed, and we all understand that this is a one-time event. We're not going to be seeing this again. God, hopefully we're not. So I think it's a one-shot thing. We come in, we help the taxpayers out, and then fully next year, because we haven't used surplus, then obviously things are going to be a little bit higher. I'd like to see us next year take a look at the budget and possibly use surplus to get that as low as we can.
And George, I agree with you too, because I think the state side is going to take a pretty big revenue hit. And the fact that we're not using our surplus this year to get it to a palatable number will hold that in reserve, hold that card in reserve. I think that's a good card to have.
You're absolutely right. We're going to need it next year, I think.
Without a doubt.
If I can assure you what we could do next year, when we go to propose our 21-22 budget, we can have a column that compares to what we were originally requesting, and then we can have the actual, so that you can see, here's what we asked for when we were at 2.5, here's what we ended up with at 0, so that you'd be able to see the comparison between how much floor stripper would have cost us in one fiscal year, as opposed to a doubling of that line, because we bought 0 in the 2021 fiscal year and bought double in the 1920 fiscal year. So we can fashion the layout of our presentation in a way where, Luke, you'd be able to see that double comparison, so that you'd know what the percent increase looks like because of the change in price versus one-off of this year's oddity.
I could ask you, Francine, if you add more numbers to your spreadsheet, then you might want to put into your budget 6 magnifying glasses for us.
Okay, maybe that wasn't a good idea.
No, it is though, Francine. Luke was talking about when you're putting budgets together, and I probably don't have to tell you this, one of the things that you always want to be able to do is look back and see. It could affect it if there's no audit trail. What you're talking about is putting in that audit trail.
Yes.
I actually like that idea.
Yeah,
We'll
so
just
instead
have
of
to use
having
our
requested
computer
an
magnifiers.
actual, we would have requested, actual, and then the original request. So there'd be this new column that we could make a percentage comparison at the end for. So you could see it's really only a 3% increase because of cost difference from the year before. It's not a 203% or 103%
Right.
increase or something like 1,000% increase
And
because I'm spending
hopefully,
$1,000 on a zero line.
hopefully you'll only have to do that this once, hopefully.
That is, I
Yeah,
hope
God
we don't
willing.
have to close schools next year.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Francine.
Thank you.
So you will put something together showing us estimated savings, where it's coming from, and the identifying the items that you intend to pay.
Yes, I'll get it to you. You asked for it 2 weeks from today, so I'll get it to you by the 28th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Tracy, is Tracy still here?
I'm here.
Hi, Tracy. Keeping this in mind, if the Board of Education comes back with a zero increase in their budget, you made a little summary up, and I wonder if you could go through that with the commission and the people who are attending today.
Sure. So what that would mean is, hold on one second.
Excuse me, just a second. I wanted to say something to Stacy. That's this little, she sent that out today. Okay, we don't have that. So if you could just go through your summary so we have an idea, we can discuss it.
Okay, yeah, so if we reduce the Board of Education to a zero increase, the proposed budget would be 27,282,205, which would be a 0.15 increase in expenditures from the current budget. But it would be a 36.15 mill rate, which is a decrease from our current mill rate of 0.38 mils. And the reason that there's an increase in expenditures and still a decrease is because our grand list grew a little bit. So we have a little bit more revenue coming in. So the decrease to the taxpayer is 1.04%. Tony, I know you always like an example. So for a house worth 200,000 assessed at 170,000, it would be a $53 decrease in that person's tax bill. Our current fund balance, or our fund balance at June 30, 2019 was 4,340,492. Of that, we used 140,000 to balance the 2019-20 budget. We also, I believe it was your November meeting, used $58,000 to purchase the new senior minibus. So that would leave a fund balance of 4,142,492, or 15% of this proposed budget.
Stacy, could you unmute Luke Freemuth?
Luke, are you there?
I'm here. Yeah,
Okay.
I guess the one thing I wanted to comment on that is, based on the conversation we just had, I don't know that there's a guarantee that Francine gets to a zero increase budget, because she needs to spend a certain amount to be pushed into next year to get her to that point. Otherwise, the funds go into the 2% account. I.e., if her budget's $400,000 under right now, and she can only spend 200,000, the other 200,000 go into the account. They don't go against the budget for next year.
Luke, one item that I thought of when we were talking was the debt payment that the Board of Ed makes to the town, and that could be prepaid. That's 140,000. I think we could also have them prepay their pension payment. I'd have to check with our pension company on that, but I don't see why we couldn't do that. So those are two pretty big items that could be done if she can come up with enough services or hard goods to pre-purchase.
Thank you,
All right,
Tracy.
perfect.
Great.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any comments about this? We're going to have basically another virtual meeting, like a public hearing, where people will be invited to come in, and invited ahead of time to propose any questions or email us with comments. And hopefully we'll have a better handle on where the Board of Ed is. They're going to have to come in with new numbers for that hearing. So when we have the hearing, we would expect a new budget from the Board of Ed, and that summary that they're going to prepare should justify why they're coming in with a 0% increase. Again, this is, we're looking at this as a one-time happening. But I think one of the good things is that even though this is estimated, and there may be, if they don't get some of their things decreased, or if the state cuts back a little more on the cost sharing, we still have a very healthy surplus that we, or undesignated fund balance that we can go to. So I think that we should take up the Board of Education on their offer to come in with a 0% increase, using their projected surplus to buy down next year's budget. And we still have our undesignated fund balance if things don't turn out from the state. And you know how that goes. We don't know what they're going to do one moment to the next. So we always have that in reserve also. And that's great that we have the money there to do that. I'd like to, especially with this, with the way the economy is right now, I would like to do everything we can. And this is a good first step in coming in with less than a 0. And I really think that next year we ought to try to do the same thing. I know that's projecting way out, but that's how I feel. So I'd like to ask
make
if
the
there,
disclaimer that the Board of Ed may not be able to do that in the following year unless COVID comes back in the fall.
I realize that. I was talking more about our undesignated balance than we were the Board of Ed. Do any members, first of all, want to comment on tonight's meeting? We will be having that virtual public hearing followed by a meeting where we will set the mill rate. So, and then that's going to, and just so everybody knows that once we set that mill rate after the public hearing, that will not go to a town meeting where they could vote on the budget, nor will it go to a referendum. Instead, under these new rules, it's going to go to the Board of Selectmen and they will adopt the budget or not. I suppose they could send it back to us. I don't find that likely, but so we're going to have a public hearing. We'll see where that takes us. We're going to get more information from the school board. And then I also mentioned, and I'm going to sit down with Tracy because I'm sure she has an explanation, but in looking at the town side of the budget, I identified several line items where we had spent less than 50% of our budget. And so I'm going to sit down with Ed and Tracy and go over those items and see if there might be any place to move some money there too. And if in everybody on the board, if you go back through the municipal budget and keep an eye on the percentage increases and decreases, more on the increases. See if you see anything that you have any questions on. I just made about 10 of them, and I'll sit down with Tracy and Ed. I'm sure some of them are easily explained, but you know, if we can pick up something there too, we'll look at it. That's enough for me. So anybody else want to comment on tonight?
I think the Board of Ed and Francine should be, you know, I mean, commended. I think I think some of the points that Luke made are well taken. I just think that, you know, there's a, you know, having the ability to just set it in and get it adopted obviously it's kind of weird this year, but the fact that we're being responsive and responsible to our taxpayers by maybe possibly bringing in a zero here, I just think that will actually, show the town that we're being responsible now. And so, yeah, I wholeheartedly support the proposal that's being put forward.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
I'd
This
like
is
to,
Rich. Sorry, go
this
ahead.
is Mike. I'd like to mention that I would, basically what we're doing here, agreement and on the same page that the 0% is definitely warranted considering what we're going through this year. And I think it's just a matter of how we get there. So Luke, thanks for your input. I think it kind of keeps us in line with what we are ultimately trying to do, which is to maintain good budgets and audit trails. And in the end, I'm sure we can figure out a way to make this happen for whatever this hopefully one-time deal is. And it's nice to see that as a town, we're coming together, as a board, we're coming together. I just want to mention real quick, it's outside of Board of Finance, but Economic Development Commission is putting together a few programs to help the businesses in town, including, for lack of a better term, cash mob schedule. Something similar was done in Harwinton and Burlington, and hopefully you guys will keep your eye out for that and participate. That's it for my plug there.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Adam?
No, I'm good. I think everything that was done today was terrific.
George, if you don't mind, I'd like to just
Absolutely.
chirp
Go
one
ahead.
more time here. It's great. I appreciate everything that's going on, that we have, unfortunately, we have what's going on within the country, within our town, that we have this savings as a result of this virus. I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that although we have a 0% increase in the budget this year with education, we actually have a 2.5% increase in the budget this year with education. And it's only because a shortfall in the prior year that's going to offset it that gets us to 0% this year. So I just want us to be conscious of the fact that a 2.5% increase next year means a 5% increase to our overall budget next year. And I think we just need to be cognizant of the fact that although we have a little bit of a shell game going on, we definitely have an increase in spending going on. So I just want to make that, I just wanted to make that point to the group. That's all.
Luke, I don't understand your math, so please forgive me if I'm missing something, but if we're at a 0 and we're approved at a 0 and I come to you next year with a 2.5 increase, it's not a 5, it's a 2.5.
I'm sorry, Francine. This year you came to us with 2.5.
Yes.
And you are using last year's shortfall to pay for part of this year's.
Yes.
Right. So you still had a 2.5% increase in spending this year. It's just that you're using last year's revenues to offset spending this year. So if you increase spending 2.5% next year, then from this year to next year, it's 5%.
Correct.
Because
Only if I go in with the
we're not
2.5.
going to get, because we're not going to get 2.5% from this year to apply to next year. It's a shell game, and it's fine, and it's going to get us to where we want to be this year.
I just want to make sure that my
But
numbers
next year-
reflect what you're saying when I go to put them together next year. So we'll have to.
So
look at
prior to you coming to us with this reduced spending in the 1920 year, you were at 2.5%.
Yes.
Thereabouts.
Yep.
That means your spending went up 2.5%. It's just that your revenues also went up a good share because your spending in the prior year went down.
Yes.
So it's a shell game. And next year, if it's another 2.5%, we're not going to have that 2.5% from the 1920 year anymore. So it's going to be a 5% increase. And if you want to talk about it offline, that's fine. I just caution people that 2.5 and 2.5% is 5%. We just got an offset from the prior year.
Yeah, I would like to talk about it offline because I'm seeing it as if you're approving me at a no change from this year, then a no change plus 2 is a 2. If you were
But-
approving me
but
at the
you're-
2.5,
but you're-
it would be 5.
But Francine, what
But
he's trying to say
Francine, you're,
is bottom line is gonna be a 5%. The bottom line from last year to 2 years out, even though you had the savings because of the COVID monies, it's gonna be a net 5% jump 2 years out.
Let's,
If you come to us
Let's-
with
let's
a
not-
2.5% increase again.
no, I think,
Let's not assume that it's gonna be a 5%.
right,
So
so,
that assumes 2.5% is going up on top of the 2.5% here. It
So-
could be, if you look at the average over the last 8 years, they averaged somewhere around 1%.
Okay, so then it would be.
Understood, George.
3.5.
Understood, but it's because we've been playing this shell game for a very long time. Right? So this year you will punch it into that formula as 0%, but spending actually went up 2.5%.
Right.
So let's look at it this way. There's just to take the other numbers out of it. If the Board of Ed comes with the exact same budget in the following fiscal year that they're coming to us with today, that's 2.5% increase.
Correct.
So next year, if they truly have a 0% increase in spending, it will be a 2.5% increase to the overall budget. Yes.
Right.
Okay, so
Yep.
Luke, I'm just seeing it this way. I want to make sure I'm understanding what I'm telling my Board of Ed when we meet on Monday. So at a 0, our budget, our town allocation is going to be 15,257,126, as opposed to what we were asking for, which was 15,652,303. Is that correct? Are you seeing it? That's
Yeah.
a 0%. So
I'm not looking at the numbers, but I'll take your word for them. Yep.
okay, so
Only
what we
because
were-
I don't have them in front of me.
our current budget is 15.2 for 1920. Our 2021 that we were proposing tonight before the surplus discussion was 15.6, almost 15.7.
Yep.
So if we were to come in next year with 15.2, we would be at a 0. Because this year would be 15.2 again. We'd have 3
Right.
years of 15.2. So anything
Well,
above
understood,
15.2 is the
Francine,
increase.
but you're 15.2 because the 1920 year was actually 14.9. And you're using 3 of that to make up for your 15.2.
I understand.
But your 15.2 shouldn't be 15.2. It should actually be 15.6. So next year, when you have a 0 increase in spending, it's actually 15.6, not 15.2.
So in order,
Because you don't have that.
yeah,
Because you don't have that offset from the prior year
you
Correct.
have to cut your budget 2.5% to come in.
at a 0% again.
So come in next year at a 0% and it'll be a 2.5%.
You'll have to
I-
teach me that shell game next year because I'm still a little thick about it.
We know things are gonna go up next year, but there are a lot of moving pieces here. For instance, our property tax revenues increased by $479,000 this year. We're not guaranteed that either next year.
No,
Or
we
it
aren't.
could be more, or it could be more. So,
Which is why it's good we have a healthy surplus.
correct. So
Let's keep it
Yeah,
that way.
we know the budget for Board of Education is gonna be more than 0% next year. It's gonna go up. It has to go up. And we just don't know where things are. I mean, we could have a family come in here with some people that need to be outplaced in the family and we could throw the budget out. There's so many different moving pieces here. All we can do is estimate and be prudent so that when we do have a problem, we've got a surplus that we can turn to help get us over that bump in the road. Anyway, this is the year that we need to help our taxpayers, and I think this is the right way to go. Rich, I know you didn't have a chance to say something. I jumped in front of you, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Todd and Francine for answering my questions in a very timely fashion. And I think this is definitely going to help the taxpayer, which is what we're going to need to do. I think next year we're going to be in the same boat. Economists are looking at basically, depression era economy for 18 to 24 months. So more to come. We're going to have to really be careful going forward.
Thank you. I want to thank one person here, and that's Stacy Seth, because she put this whole thing together, got everybody the information needed to get on. It would have been terrible had she not been here with me tonight, because I had a real issue with my computer, and she got me through it. That was the operating delay, she said, was to take care of me. But she was great. She helped us all through this, and she's doing it for all the other committees. And I just want to say kudos to Stacy.
Thank you.
I'm 2 nights in a row with her. She's doing a fantastic job.
It sure is. Okay, at this time, is there anybody in the public that wants to say something? Well, we might have to identify you. Everyone's unmuted. Okay, everybody's unmuted. So, Tony, your face popped up first.
Okay. I just wanted to say it's good news that we had the 0%. I wish to God we didn't have the pandemic, and I wish we could have done it without the pandemic. And I hope there's a cure to it very soon, because it's a terrible thing.
Well, thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Is there anybody else that wants to say something? Okay, then.
Not getting anything?
Is everyone unmuted?
Yes.
Yeah, everybody is unmuted, and we do have the chat feature as well.
Okay, if there's nothing else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, if you could identify yourself.
Steve, Steve Turner, so
Steve
moved.
made the motion,
Rich second.
and Rich second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Good night.
All
Thanks.
right, guys, have a
Good
good
evening.
night. Stay safe and healthy.
Thanks,
You too.
Adam. You too. Okay.
All set?
Yep.
Okay.